In this lesson, we're going to talk about project type, and it's important for you as a business analyst to know the different type of projects that you can find yourself working on, depending on the organization, depending on the domain, right? So you might be hired as a business analyst in the construction industry. In that case, you'll be working on construction type of project. It might be software development project where you're focused on building solution like software application to solve problem. You might be in a company where they are all about new product development. They want to develop new product and sell those products in different markets. So you might be a BA working in those sort of project on those sort of project. You can also be a business analyst on research project as well, and that shows that business analyst role is very dynamic, it's very impactful because of the type of work you do. Your impact is always felt on project. So you also be needed in healthcare industry, working on healthcare products, projects, solving problems for that industry as well. Some of the project you can work on implementation of hospital management system, booking system. There are lots of projects there that really directly impacts people's life. So you can be in that domain. You can also be working on some community development project, right, and educational project as well. So this shows that business analyst role is very dynamic. You can find yourself working on all sorts of projects, to be honest. So it's important for you to be flexible even when you don't have domain knowledge in any of these industry. You are able to pick those domain knowledge up by researching, looking for information that would help you add value to the project that you work on. Now we're going to talk about project management lifecycle. Now that we understand different type of projects, based on different domains that a business analyst can function, you also need to understand the life cycle. So how does a project run from start to finish, right? It's important for you as a business analyst or product owner, anybody that works on a project, in a project setting, to understand the life cycle. It just gives you a structure. It gives you, a framework to follow, and you're able to find yourself. If, for instance, you find yourself, maybe you've just been employed and the project is already running. Project is at execution phase, and you're struggling to find your feet or understand what's going on. Well, having a good knowledge of project management lifecycle would help you in those sort of situations, to give you that framework to really feel what stage of the project you're currently running on, and to be able to find how you be able to add value quicker. Now let's talk about the first one, which is product or project initiation phase. So every project starts with initiation, right? The process is simply describing how a project starts. So project doesn't just start from thin air, right? It might not be a formal gathering or formal documentation that initiates a project. It might just be some form of idea, and somebody is really keen on implementing that idea and just goes to the planning phase. But projects are initiated nonetheless, whether formally in proper project management process recommendation, or it is just a casual formal approach to it. Project initiation phase starts any project you're going to be working on. So what happens during this phase? You might be wondering. We would answer all these questions as we go along. But for you to just understand this concept, you just need to know that This is the phase where the idea of the project, that need, we talked about need in previous lesson, the solution to those needs, is conceived. Like, what are we trying to work on? For example, I have an idea. I want to build a house in 1 year, right? So you can initiate a project based on that. I want to build a software that solves a specific problem. Now you can see there's a need and there's a solution. So every project will be initiated based on an idea. Maybe there's a need, or there's an opportunity, or you want to apply a solution to some sort of problem. So at that stage where you're trying to articulate the idea, the solution, then the requirement, that happens during project initiation phase. So in a formal project management, definition, at the project initiation phase, some of the artifacts that you'll be generating are project charter, business case, document, that would help you justify that project. At the end of the day, you need to be able to justify why you're doing a project, right? So in terms of all the project constraints, like how much you want to spend on this project, what are the resources you need, what is the objective, what is the problem we're trying to solve. Like, we've talked about resources. Some of the risks you need to also mention, and you might have used some of the tools that we've discussed throughout this course so far, in helping to articulate the idea of this project. Now, in a business context, it is important to look through that business case, that justifies why you should be doing this project, or a project charter that formalizes or authorizes a project, right? A project charter is that document that authorizes a project. The project sponsor will hand over a project charter to the project manager. And as I said, some of the components of project charter or business case is the objective, it is the solution, it is potential benefits, the budget, things like schedule, how long do you want project to run for, what's the deliverable, what problem are you solving, who are the stakeholders, like who do you need to be able to solve this problem or execute the project, right? So when you have all those documented, then you call a meeting and meet with some of the stakeholders that are important to be able to execute or get the buy-in of the project. And once that is done, we move to the second phase, which is project planning. Now, in the project planning phase, what you're now doing, based on information you got from project initiation phase, you're looking at it. At this time, you already have the resources in terms of the people that will be working on this project as well. You might not have all of them, but at least the key people like project manager, a business analyst might be there, So they would sit down and plan, how are we going to execute this project? What do we need? So, for example, you're trying to build a house. Here, in project initiation, you've formalized that, you've told us the type of house, at least on a high level, the high level requirement. Told us the type of house you want, the features of the house, all of those things. In planning phase, we're planning how are we going to deliver on this project, all these requirements, at least on a high level. We can now break it down into, granular details, like break it down further in our planning state to understand each component more, right? So we can know, okay, what will be the cost implication, how quickly can we then deliver, all of those things, and the output of that will be in our project plan, right? So once we are able to plan in terms of resources, in terms of scope, in terms of budget, in terms of quality and all other project constraints, then once it is approved, we would then move to the project execution phase. This is where we're actually implementing based on the project plan. So this is when in a kind of like building or construction project example I've given, this is when people will go to the site and start to dig the ground, start to put bricks and mortar together, to build the house. So this is the execution phase, the doing phase, as I would say, right? So all the resourcing must be coordinated. So be a project manager, you must be on course here, explaining the requirement clearly. A business analyst here will be explaining. Project manager is managing all the moving part of this project, like resourcing, making sure that resourcing is there on time, making sure that and the resourcing is not just human resource. Now we're talking about human resource, we're talking about equipment and other type of resource, software, whatever that you need to be able to deliver on this project, right? And there's also project control phase, or project monitoring and controlling phase. So in this phase, we're based on our plan here, we're monitoring, and it doesn't just happen on stage 4, it happens throughout. Really, we are trying to control all the variables of project, right, to make sure that it meets this project plan that we developed in step 2 or phase 2. So you want to make sure that your project is running according to plan. Remember, this plan would also tell us budget. As I mentioned, when the project will be completed, a project has specific start and end date, right? We've talked about that. So you need to monitor and control. So monitoring is you're on guard, you're looking at all the variables, are things going as planned. Controlling is also controlling, like when things go wrong, what do we then do? What is our response? Are you just going to allow things derail and not act? When the risk manifests, what are you doing? So that's monitoring and controlling. And final step will be project closeout. This is when we're now done with the project. We're trying to collate the lesson learned, document, closeout report, summary report, project report, to tell us about the project in general. So this is typically what happens in project management lifecycle, right? So more on that. So project initiation phase, you can see some of the output as I mentioned. Project charter, business case can also be here, project initiation document as well. Here as well, during the planning phase, you can have your scope and budget. I mentioned this. You can have your work breakdown schedule, Gantt chart, communication plan, risk management plan. So these are some of the artifacts that you can create during this phase as well. So budget and scope is like what features, because if you're requesting for additional features in construction, right, it will increase the budget. So we need to narrow a scope. Work breakdown is what are the pockets of work, who is going to do what at what time, right? Gantt chart is showing us timelines. When is this going to happen? Because some things must happen according to a schedule. Like you cannot go and roof a house that you've not done the main structure, right? So things like that. Communication plan. How do you want to engage different people working or stakeholders working on this project, or that needs to be informed? Or stakeholders are part of this process as well. All the people that have interest and impact on this project, how are you going to communicate with them? How are you going to keep them engaged, manage them appropriately? Risk management, how will you manage all the risks that can threaten your project? So it's very important consideration when you're planning. Execution, you need to track the status of all the work items. Make sure you're on top of all the KPIs, the quality, you're forecasting, like, hey, based on where we are we going to still finish? Are we going to finish at this end date based on the current pace? So you're forecasting as well, you're predicting, right? And this is monitoring and controlling. So you're looking at the deliverables, the quality of deliverable. You're tracking the effort based on these budgets we planned here. You're looking at it. Okay, based on the amount of work we've done so far, have we spent more than we should have spent at this stage in the project, right? So you can then react if we're spending more already at this stage, right? What does it mean for the full project? Are we going to overspend? Are things changing? Has exchange rate impacted on the cost of things, that we didn't even plan during our planning phase? So things happen during the project. So how then do you react and control that? And then project closure, you're really reporting, you're introspecting, you're checking like what did you do and what are some of the lessons that we can take from this process. And this is what we're talking about. So project initiation is first phase of project management life cycle. Like you want to decide and answer that question if this project is actually needed or not. Like how is it going to be beneficial, right? We can't just work on a project that has no benefit. And that's why the other concept we talk about, cost benefit analysis as well. You need to look at it from that perspective. Like if we spend this much on this project, what benefit do we then get, right? So we need to know that, and this is what we will do during project initiation phase. Things like business case, as I mentioned, feasibility study, is can we even do this project, right? And then planning phase, as I said, the second phase where you would then create a project plan that would help you guide the implementation through to the project closure. And execution is when you do everything in your project plan. So the action, the team does everything to implement the project. Control phase, as I said, monitoring and control. You're reviewing the progress, you're forecasting, you're comparing variables, you're making sure quality is right. More importantly, you're taking corrective actions where needed and preventative actions as well to prevent issues. So it's very important to know. Then project closure, last phase of the project. As you can imagine, you ensure that everything is going well. You're communicating results with your team and other stakeholders, lesson learned. You're checking to do every list, everything that you've documented in your plan, making sure that everything is checked off. So and that concludes the project.